Cucina because this is how we're gonna roll now. And I'm really excited because we have my good friend, special guest, Chef Risa Boyer with us today. We're doing this via Zoom, so it's not exactly the way we normally do things, but what is these days, right, Risa?
Exactly.
But we did want to, keep everybody involved. We want to keep the chefs that we know and love in the front lines and in everybody's minds and on their mouths, of course, so that when everything does come back, we can all come back to your restaurant. So I am just going to ask you briefly if you can tell everybody right now, what can they do to support Vanillamore?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are figuring out what Vanillamore 2.0 may look like, depending on what the landscape of restaurants looks like on the other side of this. But right now we have a full shop on our website. We have our marshmallows and shortbreads and a couple of other branded goodies. So they can all be purchased right through our website on vanillamore.com/shop.
Very nice, very nice. And today, now the other question that we also kind of want to answer is, now we have all these chefs, and I think it's so unique for you guys to be home and with your families and cooking for just yourself and your spouse, or just yourself, your spouse, your kids. So what are you making at home?
Well, it's nice to be home and cooking and not really having to put too much thought into it, keeping things simple and back to what we used to like to cook, my husband and I together. And it's fun too, because now that we have access to some of our distributors still, we're able to get some fun ingredients delivered right to our front door. So I made a really nice birthday dinner for my mom last night. We got to use ramps and shishito peppers, and I got to kind of do something a little nicer other than, lasagna or roasted chicken, the easy things.
Very cool. And what are you sharing with us today?
So we are actually going to make biscuits, and we're actually going to make them different flavors so we can show the versatility of this product. I feel like everyone's at home baking and running out of flour very quickly, but this is a nice recipe if you can something that you have for breakfast or a little snack in the afternoon, make a little fancy brunch for yourself at home. So it's a very straightforward recipe, but I think it's very doable at home.
I like it. And these are the biscuits that you normally serve at Vanillamore, right? For the brunch.
Exactly. And we change up the flavors every week for our brunch baskets. So that's why I wanted to do 2 different flavors today, so you can kind of see what the fun options are.
Awesome. So you tell me, where do we start?
All right, so basically it's really, really simple ingredients. The base is flour and butter and some dairy. A couple of notes about the ingredients. I know the recipe calls for buttermilk, but most people don't just carry buttermilk in their house. I know I don't. So really all you have to do is take regular milk, 1 cup of regular milk, and a tablespoon of buttermilk, or of vinegar will make buttermilk if you let it sit for a couple minutes. So you want to do that first, just so that you can set that aside. And it's basically going to curdle. Sometimes it looks a little, funky, but that's basically what buttermilk is. It's milk that has some acid in it. So you can use lemon juice if you don't have vinegar, but it's really simple to do.
Awesome.
Yes, and then we are going to basically combine all of our dry ingredients. The bulk of it is flour, so I have that in my big bowl. I am doing this by hand. I see you have a food processor in front of you.
I love my food processor. It makes everything easy.
It absolutely does. I would prefer to take the extra 5 minutes and mix this by hand than takes the extra 5 minutes and clean my food processor. So we will do it 2 different ways. I think it's a really good thing to show as well. Okay. You basically just combine the dry ingredients right into your food processor or your mixing bowl, and that's really just baking powder and baking soda, which will help with the rise of your biscuits. Obviously the butter does most of that work, which we can talk about when we do add the butter, but that will help make them a little bit fluffier. And then we have salt and sugar. There's always salt in everything, sweet or savory. It brings out all the flavors, and a little sugar just to sweeten them up, because why not? So we kind of mix that together a little bit, just so that the ingredients are incorporated. You don't want any chunks of salt or leavening agent when you roll out your final dough. So you just want to mix that together. If you're doing it by hand, just use your hands, or you can use a whisk. If you're doing it in the food processor, a couple pulses will make that.
Okay, and because we're using Zoom, as soon as I pulse this, it's going to switch to me, so I'm just going to do it real fast.
The wonders of technology that we're all figuring out.
Exactly.
Then, after you do that, you want to take cubed butter, and you want to make sure that this is really, really cold. So I know we both, right before we started doing this, took it right out of our refrigerator. And that's really because you don't want the butter to incorporate into the flour. You really want to end up with little pea-sized pieces of butter. So you're just going to add all of it right into your dry ingredients. And I am going to use my hands to mix this up. You are going to pulse your food processor, making sure that you don't overwork it. And you really just want it to be a nice, shaggy looking mixture.
Okay, so I think I got it, and I'm gonna see if I can actually take like a little scoop of this and bring it real close to the phone camera so they kind of get nice. I'm like, do I see myself? I do.
My extra couple of minutes to continue to mix this, and you're gonna take your extra couple minutes and do dishes later.
Yeah, see, there we go. But that was pretty much what we're looking for, right? That kind of flaky little pieces in there.
Exactly, because what happens is we're going to add the liquid afterwards, and well, we're going to add the liquid at the end, really. And basically those chunks of butter are going to create steam when we put them in the oven later, and basically puff and create little flaky layers. And that's the same way that you would make like pie dough or something like that, so that it's nice and flaky.
Perfect.
All right, I'm almost done over here.
That's correct.
All right, so then what you're gonna do is add in your great shredded cheese. I'm using mozzarella. And then whatever mix-in you want to use, if you want to use an herb or a chopped up vegetable, we've used chorizo at the restaurant. I'm actually going to use everything seasoning that I have made because I made bagels the other day, and add that. And then you're just going to mix that all together.
And this was the part, Risa, where you said people can really use, especially because, you know, we've come to understand that it's a little bit difficult necessarily to find certain things at the grocery store. So whatever you have on hand, whatever fresh herbs, whatever spices, whatever cheese, you know, kind of come up with your own combination here.
Exactly. All right, and you're just going to mix that just to incorporate it. So you're in your food processor and me by hand. I have a love-hate relationship with the feeling of flour on my hands, but it is nice to get your hands right in and feel exactly what you're working with. And then basically you're gonna add in your cold dairy, which we have made buttermilk, or using buttermilk if you had that on hand. And you're just gonna pour it in, and you're just gonna mix it together until it just starts to sort of form a dough. This is where you want to be really careful not to overmix it, especially if you're using the food processor. So just add in all of your dairy and just mix it, pulse it until it just comes together.
Okay.
So you're transferring that into a bowl, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, I am actually going to dump this right onto the table because my dough is probably not quite as together as yours is, just because I'm doing it by hand. So I'm just going to turn it right out onto my counter.
Is it still going real piecey?
Say that again?
Will it still be real piecey for the time being?
Yeah, exactly. So now you're just gonna wanna mix it until it really comes together and sort of forms a dough. It's going to always be a little bit uneven because that's the point. You want to have those pieces of butter kind of in between the layers of dough. So really until it just comes together. There might be a few loose pieces, just sort of fold them into the center so that they mix in. And you'll see some pretty distinct, well, you'll see the pieces of cheese, but you'll also see some pretty distinct pieces of butter right in there. Okay. And then the recipe that I sent you does something sort of interesting where it tells you to flatten your dough into a 1-inch thick square and then cut it into 3 pieces and stack it on itself. You don't have to do that. My assumption is that the reason that recipe calls for it is just to make these extra flaky. It's almost like when you're making croissant dough where you're layering dough and butter together. It kind of adds to the flakiness. So I'm gonna do that because why not?
That's fine, I'll let you do that while I still bring this together.
And then your end goal is to flatten this into a 1-inch thick piece of dough again. You can do it by hand. I'm gonna use a rolling pin. Either way is fine. So I'm gonna shape mine into a square. At the restaurant, we typically do square biscuits because there's a lot less waste. But if you prefer, you can just use a ring cutter and make more traditional round.
Make round biscuits.
Exactly.
I've just realized I'm a terrible judge of what an inch is.
Well, it doesn't make that much of a difference. The thickness doesn't make a huge difference. It really would just mean that your biscuits are taller. So like basically the thickness of like the first part of your thumb is a good indicator of an inch.
Okay, I think we're good.
Are you gonna go round or square?
I'm going square too.
Awesome. All right, so then you can cut them really whatever size you want. About a 2-inch square is a good size biscuit. They'll rise, they shouldn't spread a ton, but they'll definitely get larger. So keep that in mind. I'm gonna just put mine right onto my sheet pan, and I have every tool I could possibly need ever to survive in my home kitchen. So I have a Silpat that I'm gonna use, but parchment paper is more than fine.
Okay, I was gonna say, and I did mine with parchment paper, which should be okay, yes?
Absolutely. So that happens when you work for Sur La Table for 2 years, is you end up with everything you could ever need.
Everything has a cell.
And then the best thing to do after they are all laid out in your tray is to just brush them with a little bit of melted butter. And if you want, depending on your flavors, I have everything mixed in here, which has extra salt already. I am a fiend for good flaky salt, so depending on what flavor you do, you can always sprinkle a little bit of flaky sea salt on the top as well.
Okay.
Delicious.
And we have our ovens preheated to 425.
Yep. And they're gonna take about 15 minutes or so to bake. I would set your timer for about half that amount of time. Rotate them. Most ovens do not bake evenly. Rotate them halfway through and you'll kind of get a gauge on how much longer they need.
Okay, cool. All right, so it took us a little bit more than 15 minutes because we wanted to get the color.
Yes, absolutely. Nice and golden brown.
Yes, yours are nice and golden brown. I forgot my melted butter on top, so mine are a little pale, but they smell amazing nonetheless, which is fine by me. And Risa, where can people find you? What's your social media?
Yeah, so the restaurant Instagram handle is just at Vanillamore, and my personal one is at Risa Boyer. I post all of my home baking extravaganzas on there, even though I'm terrible at remembering to take pictures. And then for the restaurant website to purchase e-commerce goods during this downtime, it's just vanillamore.com/shop.
That is awesome. And then, of course, guys, Chef Risa's biscuit recipe is going to be available at caradifalco.com. And of course, you can follow me, Facebook and Instagram at Cara Di Falco. Risa, thank you so much for hanging out with me today via these new technologies that we're all working on. Those of us not tech people. And for this week in the quarantine, Cucina, I will see you guys next time. Chef, thank you once again. Bye, guys.